The desert wind howled like a wounded spirit that night. It swept through the dry canyons and across the ghost town of Sable Creek, rattling loose shutters and stirring up the dust of forgotten sins. Under the bleeding glow of a red moon, a lone rider emerged from the shadows, an Apache man, tall and scarred. With long black hair that flowed behind him like a banner of night dot, his name was Talon, though the townsfolk, if they dared whisper it at all, called him the Ghost Rider of the Canyon. He was not a ghost, but he had lived like one. Exiled from his people for breaking a blood oath, hunted by bounty men for crimes he never confessed, he carried silence like a weapon. That night, Talon rode not for war, but for escape. His stallion limped, bleeding from the flank. He needed shelter, even for a few hours. Before the cavalry patrols caught his scent, Sable Creek was mostly abandoned, a town left to the wind and coyotes. But one faint light flickered from an old house at the edge of the hill. He dismounted, every step cautious, his moccasins sinking into the soft dirt. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, caught the shadow of a woman through the curtain, her figure outlined by candlelight. He knocked once. The door opened slowly. She stood there, a woman of 30, auburn hair tangled from the wind, eyes the color of dying embers. Her dress was plain, faded with time, but her posture was firm, unafraid. Her name was Evelyn Ward, the widow of a rancher who died 3 winters past. But unlike most widows, she wore no ring, and her voice had the brittle calm of someone who'd forgotten how to be afraid. She studied him for a long moment. "You're not from around here." He said nothing. "I don't take kindly to drifters," she continued, though her tone wavered slightly. "But you look half dead. Come in before the coyotes finish you." Talon stepped inside. The house smelled of cedar smoke and loneliness. A rifle rested on the mantel. A half-burned Bible lay open on the table. He lowered himself onto a wooden chair while she poured water from a clay jug. "Apache, aren't you?" she asked quietly. He looked up, and the flicker of the candle caught his eyes, dark, ancient, wounded. "Once," he murmured. She nodded. "Once is enough." Outside, thunder rolled across the desert. The storm was coming fast, a desert tempest full of wind and red dust. Evelyn closed the shutters, her hair catching in the candlelight. Something about her silence stirred him. There was no fear, no disgust, just distance. She finally spoke again, her voice soft but steady. "You're being hunted, aren't you?" Talon didn't answer. He didn't have to. The blood on his sleeve spoke for him. Evelyn set the jug down, her hands trembling slightly. "Men came by here last week. Soldiers. Said an Apache had killed 2 ranch hands near the border. Said they'd hang him if they found him." His jaw tightened. "They killed my brother," he said quietly, "and called it justice." The words hung heavy in the small room. Evelyn didn't respond at first. She walked to the window, peering out into the red dust that began to rise like a veil over the desert. "Justice," she whispered. "Funny word. Folks around here use it like a gun." The thunder grew louder. The house creaked. Talon stood to leave, but her voice stopped him. "Don't. The storm will kill you faster than the soldiers will." He hesitated, eyes searching hers. "Stay," she said. "Just for the night." Something in her tone, weary, defiant, desperate, pulled him back from the door. She looked at him then, really looked. The scars on his chest, the dirt, the exhaustion in his eyes, and yet, beneath all that, the quiet strength of a man who had once loved deeply and lost everything. Her next words came out trembling, like a confession. "Talon." She said his name for the first time, and it felt like a prayer breaking silence. "Can you be my husband? Just for one night?" The candle flickered. The wind howled through the cracks. He turned toward her slowly, the storm raging outside, something unspoken building between them, part mercy, Part mystery, part unbearable ache. He didn't answer, but his silence said everything. The wind battered the shutters until they rattled like old bones. Outside, the red dust swirled through the storm, turning the world into a blur of fire and shadow. Inside, the candle on Evelyn Ward's table flickered violently. Stretching their silhouettes across the wooden walls, the widow and the Apache, two souls bound by accident and silence. Talon stood near the door, unsure whether to stay or go. The woman's words, "Can you be my husband just for one night?" echoed inside him like a drumbeat he could not quiet. He had heard strange requests before, but this one carried something else, sorrow dressed as courage. Evelyn's hands were steady now as she poured another cup of water and pushed it toward him. "You're safe here tonight," she said, her voice low. "The storm will keep the soldiers away." Talon accepted the cup. His fingers brushed hers for a moment, a fleeting contact that made her flinch, not from fear, but from the spark of something she hadn't felt in years. He studied her silently. Why would a woman ask a man she just met to be her husband, even for a night? He finally asked, his tone quiet but sharp. Evelyn looked toward the window, her reflection framed by candlelight. "Because sometimes a woman doesn't want protection," she said. "She just wants to feel alive before the dawn comes." Her words lingered in the air. Talon set the cup down. "You are not afraid of me," he said. She turned, her gaze meeting his. "Should I be?" He didn't answer. He only watched her, and in that stillness, she saw the shadow of a man who'd known both love and war, peace and loss. His scars told stories she would never hear, and yet she wanted to understand every one of them. The thunder cracked again, shaking the floorboards. Evelyn moved to close the final window, but a sudden gust slammed it open, scattering papers across the room. Talon stepped forward instinctively, catching the window and pulling it shut with a force that made the house tremble. For a moment, they stood close, her breath quick, his chest rising and falling like a tide against the storm. "Thank you," she whispered. Eyes locked on his. He nodded once, his expression unreadable. "You live alone here?" "Yes," she said. "Since my husband died." He hesitated. "You said you were a widow, but you wear no ring." Her eyes darkened. "Because I was never truly his wife. The church said the vows, the town saw the papers, but my heart never belonged to him. He was a cruel man. When he died, people pitied me. They shouldn't have." Talon listened in silence. There was no judgment in his gaze, only the quiet understanding of someone who knew pain that didn't bleed. Evelyn looked away, her voice trembling now. "I've lived alone for 3 years. Nights are the hardest. You start talking to shadows, pretending they talk back. When I saw you at my door, I didn't see an outlaw. I saw someone who didn't belong anywhere, same as me." Talon lowered his head slightly. "Belonging is a thing men like me stopped believing in long ago." The wind outside screamed like a beast. Evelyn moved closer to the fire, her fingers brushing her neck nervously. "Then don't think of it as belonging," she said softly. "Think of it as resting. Just for one night." He looked at her, the flicker of the fire painting his muscles in bronze and shadow. "You said husband. That word carries weight." "I know," she whispered. "And I didn't say it for love. I said it because I need something I can't name." Talon's breath slowed. The silence between them thickened, heavy and fragile. Evelyn reached for the table drawer and pulled out a small silver locket. She held it out to him. "This belonged to my mother. She said if a man wears it for one night under her roof, the devil won't touch him." He took it gently, his large hand closing over hers. The warmth of her skin, the tremor in her fingers, all of it felt too human, too close. "Then tonight," he said quietly, fastening the locket around his neck, "the devil will have to wait." A faint smile touched her lips. Then maybe, she murmured, he'll leave us both alone until morning. The candle dimmed, thunder echoed, and outside the storm raged on, but inside that small wooden house something else had begun to stir, something neither of them fully understood. The night had only just begun. The storm howled through the night like a wild creature, tearing at the roof and whispering through the cracks of the old house. Yet inside, the air had grown still, thick with words unspoken, emotions neither dared to name. Evelyn sat near the fire, her knees drawn up, eyes fixed on the flames. Talon sat across from her, silent, his hands resting on his knees. The flickering light painted him in shadows, the scars across his chest like carved stories of another life. After a long while, she spoke. "You must be wondering why I asked what I did." Talon didn't answer. He simply looked at her, waiting. Evelyn's voice trembled at first, but steadied as she continued. "When I said I wanted you to be my husband for one night, I wasn't asking for your body. I was asking for your name." His brow furrowed slightly. "My name?" She nodded. "In Sable Creek, a woman alone is easy prey. Men from town come up here, thinking I'm desperate or broken. But if I had a husband, even in name, they'd keep their distance. There's one man in particular who won't stop." Talon's gaze darkened. "Who?" Evelyn swallowed hard, eyes lowering. "Sheriff Maddox." The name carried venom. Even Talon had heard it whispered among travelers. A lawman who wore the badge like a weapon, cruel and cunning beneath his polished boots. "He came here 3 nights ago," Evelyn said, her voice dropping. "He said he could protect me from the bandits roaming the canyons, if I'd agreed to be his woman." Talon clenched his jaw. "And you refused." "I'd rather die," she said flatly. "But he doesn't take no for an answer. He said he'd come back when the moon turned red. That's tonight." The words hit like a bullet between them. Talon rose slowly, the floorboards creaking under his weight. "So you wanted a husband to keep the devil out of your door?" "Yes," she whispered, "and maybe to keep me from feeling alone when he comes." Outside, lightning flashed again, and for an instant, Talon's face looked carved in stone, fierce, protective, yet deeply haunted. He turned toward the door, his voice low and steady. "You should have chosen someone else. A man with no blood on his hands." "I didn't choose you," she said quietly. "Fate did." "You came when I needed someone most." He looked back at her. The truth of her words stirred something deep within him, something he'd buried long ago beneath the ashes of his tribe and the deaths of his kin. The candle sputtered. Evelyn stood and stepped closer to him. "If Maddox comes here and sees you, he'll think twice. You're not just any man. You're the kind of man who carries silence like a weapon. He'll feel it." Her voice trembled slightly, but her gaze was unwavering. "Will you stay until dawn, Talon?" He hesitated, his heart caught between instinct and something unfamiliar, compassion. "Yes," he said finally, "until dawn." She exhaled in relief, though her hand still shook. As the thunder rolled, Evelyn reached into a small wooden box on the mantel and pulled out a silver ring, tarnished and worn. She handed it to him. "He'll expect a sign, something to prove we're wed. Just wear it until morning." Talon took it, the metal cold against his calloused fingers. Without a word, he slid it onto his finger. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the wind rattling the roof and the storm breathing outside. "You should rest," he said softly. "I can't," she replied. "Not until this night is over." He nodded, then sat near the window, rifle across his lap, watching the storm. The firelight danced on his skin, catching the turquoise beads and feathers of his tribal necklace. Evelyn sat across from him, her heart pounding with both fear and something dangerously close to comfort. As the hours passed, she found herself watching him more than the flames, the way his chest rose and fell, the calm in his eyes despite the storm. Near midnight, a sound broke through the wind, hooves. Evelyn froze. Her cup slipped from her hand, shattering against the floor. Tajan's head snapped up. His eyes met hers, sharp, alert, unafraid. "They're here," she whispered. Outside, a lantern's glow appeared through the storm, swinging from a rider's hand. Then another. And at the front of the pack, wearing a long duster coat and a smirk that could slice through bone, rode Sheriff Maddox. He dismounted slowly, boots sinking into the mud. His voice cut through the thunder. "Evelyn Ward, I told you I'd come for my answer tonight." Tajan's hand tightened on the rifle. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest. The storm outside roared, but the real one was now inside the walls of her house. The thunder rolled across Sable Creek like cannon fire, echoing through the canyons and into the bones of the night. Inside Evelyn Ward's small wooden house, the air grew tight with fear. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one walking toward her door. Sheriff Maddox dismounted slowly, brushing the rain from his duster coat. His boots squelched in the red mud as his men held their lanterns high. Lightning flashed, revealing his smirk, sharp, arrogant, and hungry. Inside, Evelyn's breath hitched. Her hand trembled on the table, while Tajan rose silently from his chair. The Apache's eyes hardened, his muscles tense under the candlelight. "Stay behind me," he said in a low voice. Evelyn hesitated. "He'll kill you if he sees who you are." Tajan's lips curved slightly, not in humor but in a kind of quiet defiance. "He'll have to try." A heavy knock boomed through the house. "Evelyn," Maddox called. "You know, I don't like being kept waiting." The woman's pulse hammered in her ears. She swallowed hard, straightened her back, and moved toward the door. Tajan stood just out of sight, in the shadows near the window, rifle steady in his hands. When she opened the door, the lantern light from outside splashed across her pale face. Maddox grinned. "Evening, sweetheart. Storm's bad tonight. You should have invited me in before the sky turned mean." Her voice was steady but cold. "You weren't invited at all." Maddox took a step closer, his gloved hand gripping the doorframe. "Still playing hard to get, huh? You know, a woman alone shouldn't live this far out. Bad men roam these canyons." Evelyn forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm not alone." Maddox paused, his grin fading slightly. "What do you mean?" She stepped aside just enough for the candlelight to spill into the room, revealing Tajan standing tall, bare-chested, his long black hair loose over his shoulders, tribal beads glinting against his bronzed skin. The sheriff froze. His hand went to his revolver. "What the hell?" Evelyn cut in, her voice sharp. "My husband. Tajan Ward. He came home yesterday." The air went still. Rain battered the roof. Thunder cracked overhead, and Maddox's men exchanged uneasy glances. "Your husband?" Maddox said slowly, eyes narrowing on the Apache. Tajan didn't move, didn't blink. His rifle rested loosely in his hands, but the threat in his stance was clear. "You came to her house uninvited," he said quietly, his accent soft but his tone cutting through the noise like a blade. "In my land, that's disrespect." The sheriff forced a laugh, though it came out thin. "Disrespect? I call it curiosity. Didn't know Evelyn had a taste for savages." Evelyn's face hardened. "You watch your mouth, Sheriff." He smirked. "You planning to stay with him long, darling? Folks in town might not take kindly to you sharing a bed with a—" The rifle clicked. Maddox froze mid-sentence. Tajan's eyes burned like coals. "Finish that word," he said quietly, "and I'll make sure it's your last." For the first time, Maddox saw death looking back at him, not rage, but a calm certainty that came from a man who'd already buried his past. The sheriff stepped back slightly, his boots crunching in the mud. Evelyn's voice softened but stayed firm. "You can tell the town whatever you want, Sheriff, but if you step foot here again, you'll answer to my husband." The word husband hung heavy in the air. Maddox's jaw clenched. He spat into the mud and turned toward his horse. "This isn't over," he muttered. "You'll regret lying to me, Evelyn." She didn't respond. The riders mounted their horses and disappeared into the storm, their lanterns vanishing one by one into the darkness. Evelyn shut the door, her back pressed against it as her breath came in shaky bursts. Her knees trembled, and for a moment she thought she might collapse. Talon set the rifle down, his expression unreadable. "You stood strong," he said quietly. She looked at him, eyes glistening. If I hadn't, he would have seen the fear. He nodded. Fear only feeds men like him. The silence that followed was long and heavy. Finally, Evelyn whispered, "Thank you." Talon's gaze softened. "The night isn't over yet," he said, turning toward the window. "And neither is his anger." Evelyn wrapped her arms around herself, staring at the fire. "He'll come back, won't he?" "Yes," Talon said simply. "Men like Maddox always do." Outside, the storm began to fade, but the air inside the house remained charged. The bond between them, forged in fear and defiance, had deepened, even if neither would yet admit it. As dawn began to peek through the clouds, Evelyn whispered almost to herself, "Maybe fate didn't just send me protection tonight. Maybe it sent me truth." Talon didn't reply, but the look in his eyes said he'd heard every word. The storm broke just before dawn. The first gray light crept over the horizon, cutting through the fog that hung over Sable Creek. The air smelled of wet earth and gun oil. Inside Evelyn Ward's small wooden house, the candle had burned to nothing, leaving behind only smoke and silence. Talon sat by the window, awake and unmoving. His rifle rested across his knees, and his eyes were fixed on the open desert beyond the fence line. He hadn't slept. Men like him rarely did. Evelyn stirred from her chair near the hearth, wrapped in a blanket. Her hair fell in loose strands across her face, her eyes heavy but alert. "You didn't close your eyes all night," she said softly. Talon's voice was low, steady. "Sleep makes a man forget his enemies. I don't have that luxury." She rose, tightening the blanket around her shoulders. "He's gone, Talon. Maddox won't come back." He turned his gaze toward her, calm, but edged with the certainty of a man who had learned the world's cruelty by heart. "He will." Evelyn looked away, toward the dim light of morning slipping through the cracks. "You sound so sure." "I've seen his kind," he said. "They don't leave until they've taken something." Before Evelyn could respond, a sound broke the fragile calm, the faint crunch of hooves in the distance. Her breath caught. Talon stood, his every motion fluid and controlled. He moved to the window, his eyes narrowing. 3 riders were approaching. "Is it him?" she whispered. "Yes," Talon said. "And he didn't come alone." Evelyn's hand went to her mouth. "He'll kill you." Talon loaded a single bullet into his rifle and looked back at her. "He'll try." The riders slowed near the gate, their silhouettes dark against the morning light. Sheriff Maddox was in front, his duster coat flapping in the wind, a cruel smirk twisting his lips. He called out, voice booming across the yard. "Evelyn, you made a fool out of me last night. I don't take kindly to that." Talon stepped onto the porch, bare-chested, calm as stone. "You should have stayed in town, Sheriff." Maddox laughed, though it was more a snarl than mirth. "You think you scare me, savage? You're on my land now, and in my county, I make the law." "You wear the law like a badge," Talon replied, "but you carry evil like a second skin." The sheriff's hand twitched toward his revolver. "Careful what you say, boy. I could hang you for breathing." Evelyn appeared in the doorway behind Talon. Leave him alone, Maddox. You've done enough. Maddox's gaze slid to her. So it's true then? You shared your bed with him? Her face flushed with fury. That's none of your business. It is when it shamas this whole town, Maddox sneered. You'll pay for that. The click of a rifle silenced him. Talon raised his weapon slowly, eyes fixed on the sheriff. You'll leave her name out of your mouth. The sheriff's men shifted nervously. One reached for his gun, and in the same heartbeat, Talon fired. The shot echoed across the canyon, shattering the dawn's quiet. The man fell from his horse, clutching his shoulder, crying out in pain. Maddox's face twisted with rage. You just signed your death warrant, Apache. He drew his revolver and fired. The bullet grazed Talon's arm, spinning him slightly, but he didn't flinch. Evelyn screamed, rushing forward, but Talon steadied himself, reloading with practiced precision. Maddox, he shouted, voice cutting through the chaos. You call yourself a man of justice. Then come face justice yourself. The sheriff snarled and spurred his horse forward, gun blazing. Talon dove to the side, firing once more. The bullet struck Maddox's hat clean off his head and sent it spinning into the mud. Next one won't miss, Talon warned. The sheriff's men backed off, muttering, glancing between their wounded partner and the silent fury in Talon's eyes. Maddox, breathing hard, hesitated. He looked at Evelyn, standing tall behind the Apache, and something flickered in his gaze. Hate, humiliation, and a strange kind of fear. This isn't over, he spat. You'll both pay for this. I'll come back with papers, with men, with fire if I have to. Talon lowered his rifle slightly, but his voice remained cold. Then I'll be waiting. Maddox mounted his horse, glaring at Evelyn one last time before riding off with his men, their figures fading into the dusty horizon. Evelyn rushed to Talon's side, her hands trembling as she saw the blood trickling from his arm. You're hurt. It's nothing, he murmured. He'll come back stronger. Next time, he'll bring the law with him. She pressed a cloth to his wound, eyes shining with fear. Then we'll be ready. Talon looked at her, the morning light washing over her face. You say, we now, he said quietly. Her lips trembled into a faint, bittersweet smile. You're my husband, even if just for one night. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then one night will have to be enough. But deep in his chest, Talon already knew the night wasn't over. Not yet. The first hint of daylight brushed across the desert, turning the horizon a bruised shade of gold and gray. The air smelled of damp dust and gunpowder. The storm had passed, but it had left behind an eerie silence that pressed on the lungs like a warning. Evelyn stood at the doorway, her bare feet still damp from the floorboards where rain had seeped through the cracks. Her eyes followed the muscular Apache warrior Talon as he moved like a shadow across the yard, checking his rifle and loading the last bullet. His long black hair caught the light of the coming dawn, and the turquoise beads around his neck glimmered faintly, like bits of trapped sky. He looked back once, his gaze steady. They will come, Evelyn. Not for justice, only for blood. Her voice trembled. Then run, Talon, before they reach the ridge. I can say you held me here against my will. I can protect you. Talon shook his head, a bitter smile curving on his lips. A man running from the truth becomes the thing they say he is. Evelyn took a step closer, her heart breaking with each breath. They'll kill you. I know, he said quietly, but they will not touch you. That is my promise. The wind lifted his hair as he turned toward the horizon again. The faint sound of hooves echoed in the distance, growing louder. The posse was closing in. Sheriff Maddox wouldn't stop this time. He had lost 2 men last night in the canyon, and he would want blood for it. Evelyn's hand shook as she reached for Talon's arm. His skin was warm, solid, a living wall between her and the nightmare galloping closer. "You don't owe me this," she whispered. Talon looked down at her, the storm in his eyes softer now. "You asked me to be your husband for one night. You gave me shelter when no one else would. A husband protects his home, even if it costs him everything." Her lips parted, but no sound came. The word husband burned in her chest. It had been desperation when she said it, a plea for safety from the sheriff's men who would have thrown her out of her own land. But now, with the dawn breaking, it meant something different. Talon lifted his rifle and walked out to the open field. The sun climbed slowly behind him, painting his skin in firelight. Evelyn wanted to scream, to beg him not to go, but her voice caught in her throat. The riders appeared at the ridge, dark silhouettes against the rising light. Maddox led them, his coat whipping in the wind. He raised a hand, and the horses slowed to a stop. "Talon of the Red Mesa." Maddox's voice cracked the silence. "You're under arrest for harboring stolen cattle and aiding a fugitive. Lay down your weapon." Talon didn't move. His voice carried across the still air. "You have no proof." "I don't need proof," Maddox spat. "I've got the word of 5 men and the trail you left behind." Evelyn stepped out onto the porch, her hair tangled, her white dress glowing faintly in the dawn. "That's a lie," she cried. "He didn't steal anything. He saved my life last night." Maddox turned his glare on her. "Step aside, ma'am. This ain't your fight." Evelyn's voice wavered but didn't break. "He's my husband." A murmur rippled through the men behind Maddox. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "You're what?" "My husband," she said again, her chin high despite the tears burning her eyes. "You'll have to shoot through me first." Talon's grip tightened on his rifle, but he didn't raise it. The silence between them stretched, deep and trembling. Then Maddox dismounted, his boots sinking into the wet ground. "So that's how it is?" He reached for his revolver, and time seemed to stop. Talon's hand moved to his rifle, but not in rage, in defense, in duty. The first shot cracked through the dawn, echoing across the desert like thunder. When the smoke cleared, Talon still stood, but his chest heaved with pain and blood ran down his side. He didn't fall. Not yet. Evelyn screamed his name and ran toward him as Maddox's men froze in shock. Talon's eyes found hers, the storm within them fading into peace. "Go inside," he whispered. "Lock the door." But she didn't. She fell to her knees beside him, clutching his hand as the sun rose fully over the horizon, bathing them both in light. And for the first time since the war, Talon smiled, not as a warrior, but as a man who had found something worth dying for. The rising sun turned the desert into gold and fire. The storm clouds had drifted away, leaving only silence, heavy, expectant, eternal. The wind carried the faint smell of gunpowder and blood, and the cries of birds returning to the sky. Evelyn knelt beside Talon, her trembling hands pressing against the wound on his side. His skin was slick with sweat and blood, but his eyes, dark and unbroken, still held that same quiet strength that had first drawn her to him. "You're going to live," she whispered, her voice trembling between command and prayer. "You hear me? You will." Talon's breath came slow. "No man escapes his path, Evelyn," he murmured, his voice rough as gravel. "The spirits already walk beside me." "Don't you talk like that," she snapped, her tears falling onto his chest. "You fought your whole life. Don't you dare stop now." He smiled faintly. "You sound like my mother when I was a boy. She said a warrior dies twice, once when his blood leaves the earth, and once when his story is forgotten." Evelyn's sob caught in her throat. "Then your story won't be forgotten. Not while I'm alive." The sheriff and his men stood in a wide circle a few yards away, unsure of what to do. Maddox's revolver still hung by his side, smoke curling from the barrel. His eyes flickered with something he hadn't felt in years, guilt. "Call your men off," Evelyn said, rising to her feet, her dress stained with blood and dust. "You've done enough." Maddox hesitated. "He shot first, ma'am." "That makes it—" "He didn't," she cut in, her voice slicing through the still air. "He only raised his rifle when you aimed to kill him." Maddox looked down at Talon, whose breathing was shallow but steady. "If I walk away now, I lose my badge," he muttered. Evelyn's eyes blazed with fury. "Then lose it. Or wear it knowing it cost a man his life who did nothing but protect a woman too foolish to see how much he risked for her." For a long moment, no one spoke. The wind shifted, carrying a whisper of the desert's breath, dry sage, hot sand, and something ancient and watching. Finally, Maddox lowered his hat. "Mount up," he said quietly. The men hesitated but obeyed, turning their horses toward the horizon. Maddox lingered one last second, then followed without another word. When the last rider disappeared into the dust, Evelyn dropped back to her knees beside Talon. His hand, still strong despite the blood loss, reached for hers. "You saved me," he said weakly. She shook her head, pressing her palm to his cheek. "No, Talon, you saved me long before tonight. I was dead inside long before you came." He tried to speak, but his breath hitched. "I am sorry I cannot be your husband for more than one night." Evelyn's tears fell freely now. "Don't you say that. You already are, in every way that matters." Talon's lips curved into a faint smile. "Then I die a married man." His hand went still in hers. His eyes, fixed on the horizon, reflected the first full light of the sun. A warmth passed over his face, soft and final. As though the earth itself was claiming him back, Evelyn pressed her forehead to his chest. Her sobs muffled by the steady rise and fall that slowly faded into stillness. The desert grew quiet again. The wind blew across the mesa, lifting the feathers from his necklace into the air. They drifted upward, blue, white, and brown, carried toward the morning light. Hours later, Evelyn dug a shallow grave beneath the mesquite tree near the edge of the hill. She marked it not with wood or stone, but with his turquoise necklace, hanging from a low branch that swayed gently in the wind by the time the sun had risen high. She stood at the edge of the grave, her dress torn, her hair wild, but her eyes clear. "I'll tell them," she said softly. "I'll tell them about the man who stood for honor when the world wanted him to crawl. About the warrior who became my husband, even if only for a single night." She turned toward the house, the light behind her casting a long shadow across the desert floor. For a moment, as the wind whispered through the canyon, she thought she heard his voice, low and strong, echoing through the distance. "Evelyn." She smiled through her tears. "I'm listening," she whispered back, and in that endless horizon of red sand and gold light, she felt him there, not gone, but part of everything around her. The dust, the wind, the dawn, the story of Evelyn and Talon, the one-night husband and the eternal warrior, became a whispered legend in the border towns, a tale told around campfires when the desert winds howled. And every sunrise that followed seemed to carry his promise through the desert. That love, once spoken, never truly dies.